Hi everybody, welcome to Mitch Maths. My name is Mitch, and today in this video we're going to be looking at fractions. So we're going to start off by looking at what is a fraction. We're then going to be looking at how we cancel fractions down. We're then going to be looking at what is an improper fraction and what is a mixed number and how you can convert between the two. We're then going to be looking at questions that ask you to give a fraction of something. And then we're then going to look at questions which ask you to express a number as a fraction of another number. And then I'll also be releasing a video after this one which goes through how you add, subtract, multiply and divide fractions as well. Okay, so let's start right at the very beginning then with what is a fraction. So a fraction is basically a way of representing a number. And in fact, any number can be represented as a fraction. For example, if I was just to write 4, just on its own, a whole integer 4, this written as a fraction would be 4 over 1. And let's think about what we've actually written here. So we've written 4 over 1 as a fraction. And if you notice, this line is actually the divide symbol. So what we're actually saying is 4 divided by 1. And of course, 4 divided into 1s is just whole 4. Or another way we could write this is we have 4 over 1 as a fraction here. This is also the same as 4 times 1 over 1. Because when we multiply fractions, which I'll come to in a later video, it becomes 4 times 1, and we can write the 4 up here in place of the 1, and it will look just like this. So we know that 1 divided by 1 is just 1, so 4 times 1 is 4, just like this. So that we know then, if this is 1, this is just the same as 4 times 1, that equals 4. So there we are, right back where we started. And if some of these steps in the middle here weren't quite clear, I think the best thing to do is to go over another example with a fraction that you guys might recognise a bit more than this 4 over 1. So if I chose a fraction like 4 over 2, or 2/4 is another way to say it, if I was to do the same thing we've done in the first row, this 2/4, if you say it like that, what you're actually saying is 2/4, like this, 2 times a fourth. And we know a fourth is a quarter, and hopefully everyone knows that 2 quarters equals a half. So we have a half, and this is the answer to, if at the start, if we look at this fraction, we say this is also 2 divided by 4. If we divide 2 into 4 pieces, what do we get? We get a half, just like this. So what I've just done here with these fractions might have helped some of you understand fractions, about what they actually are and what they're actually representing. For others of you, this might be really confusing if you're just looking at fractions for the first time, but don't worry. Some of the things I've done here in these steps I will be covering in this video, and hopefully by the end of this video and the next video about multiplying and dividing fractions as well. Come back and watch this and hopefully it will look really, really clear. So now let's go over some terminology when we look at a fraction then. So we know that a fraction is always 2 numbers, one above and one below a dividing line, just like this. So these numbers actually have names. So the top number is always called the numerator. So I'll write this out. And the bottom number is always called the denominator. Okay, so the top number is always the numerator, bottom number is the denominator, and I'll be using these terms throughout this video and the next video, so make sure you remember which one's which. Numerator's on top, denominator always on the bottom. Okay, so now we're going to start looking at cancelling down fractions and how do we do this. So cancelling down a fraction is a vital skill that you need to know to simplify your answers. And the first example I'm going to choose to show you how to do this is 6 over 9. So when we want to cancel down a fraction, what we're looking for is a common factor of the numerator and the denominator. And if you remember to one of my previous videos, a factor is a number that divides into the number in question. In this case, we're looking for a number that divides into both of these numbers, so a common factor. And if we look at this, hopefully we can spot that 6 and 9 are both in the 3 times table, which means that 6 and 9 both have a factor of 3. So we can use this to cancel down our fraction. So once we have our factor, 3, what we then do is we divide the numerator and denominator both by this factor. So we divide the top, 6, divided by 3, that's 2. And then we also divide the denominator, 9, by 3 as well, and that's 3. And that gives us 2/3. And that is our answer. That is 6/9 cancelled down till it can't go down anymore, becomes 2/3. We find the common factor and we divide the top and bottom both by this to get our new simplified cancelled down fraction. So another example that I'm going to show you guys is 18/24. And this is a slightly tricky example because it could have multiple steps. So again, just like the last video, what we want to do is we want to find a common factor between 18 and 24. So looking at this then, again, using simple tricks and always taking the easiest step, we can immediately see that 18 and 24 are both even numbers, which means they both have a common factor of 2. So what do? We divide the top by 2, so 18 divided by 2 is 9, and we divide 24 by 2, basically halving it gives us 12. So that is 18/24 cancelled down is 9/12. But in this example, we can go one step further, because 9 and 12 also both have a common factor. And the idea of cancelling down fractions is you want to cancel them down as much as possible. So if we look at 9 and 12, we can see that they are also both in the 3 times table. So now we have another common factor between these as 3. So we divide the 9 by the 3, make that a 3. 9 by the 3 gives us 3, and the 12 divided by the 3 gives us 4. And here we are with 3/4, and we can't go any further. We know 3 is a prime number, so we can't divide it by any more. There's no more common factors, so now we've reached the end of our simplifying. 18/24, simplified all the way down, becomes 3/4, or 3/4. So another way you can do this is if you start at the very beginning at 18/24, to do all this in one step, is what you can do is you can look for the highest common factor of these two numbers. So we found a factor, a common factor here and a common factor here. But if we started with the highest common factor, we could have skipped out any middle steps and gone straight to this answer. So I did a whole video, guys, on finding the highest common factor, but with numbers like this, sometimes you can do them in your head. So what you could have done is you could have had 18/24, and you could have thought, oh, so what is the highest number that can divide into 18/24? And in this case, the answer is 6. So we can divide 18 by 6, and that gives us 3, and 24 by 6 equals 4. And that gives us the exact same answer, 3/4, 3/4. And if you notice, if we look at the factors that we took in the top example where we broke it down into more steps, we have 2 and 3, and 2 times 3 equals 6. So that could be a really good way of checking your answers on these ones, guys. If you are a bit ambitious and you go for the highest common factor and cancel it all down in one go, if you want to check this answer, you could do it in more steps, and if you get the same answer, you can multiply all the factors that you use, and they should equal the highest common factor that you got in this example. Okay, so moving on to improper fractions and mixed numbers. So what is an improper fraction? So an improper fraction is essentially one where the numerator is larger than the denominator. So an example of that would be 7/5. So if you think about what 7/5 is showing us, it is 7 divided by 5, and we know that with fractions, 1/1 is equal to 1. Okay, so if this number grew bigger than 1, the answer would be greater than 1. So in fact, whenever we have an improper fraction like this, where the top is bigger than the bottom, we know that the value of this fraction is larger than 1. Likewise, if the other way around, if the top number is lower than the bottom number, for example, if that is a half or 1 over 2, we know that the value of this fraction is less than 1. Okay, so improper fraction is where the numerator is larger than the denominator. A mixed number is essentially a mixture of an integer and a fraction. So an example of this would be 2 and 4/6. This is an example of a mixed number, a whole number, and a fraction. So 2 and 4/6, this would be somewhere on the number line between 2 and 3. 2 and a fraction will sit somewhere in between there. The main skill that you need to learn with improper fractions and mixed numbers is basically how you convert between the two. That's exactly what I'm going to show you right now in this video. So first of all, we'll start by converting a mixed number into a fraction. So the example I'll go through is 5 and 3/4. So 5 and 3/4. So what we're saying here is we've got whole 5 plus 3/4. So if we were to transfer that into a decimal, we know that 3/4 is 0.75, so that would be 5.75. So how do we then convert this into an improper fraction? So what we then do is if we think about this fraction and what this is showing, so we've got 3/4 or 3/4. So if we think about what fraction would equal 1, we know that 1 over 1 equals 1. If we converted this into quarters, this would be the same as 4/4 or 4 over 4. So what we have, that is all equal to 1. So what we have here is 5 and 3/4. So what we need to do is we need to always just convert this into a fraction divided by 4. So what we need to do is we need to take this denominator 4 and we multiply it by 5. So 4 times 5 equals 20. So what we have as 5 represented as a fraction of 4 is 20/4. Okay, as in 20 divided by 4 gives us 5. And we also have 3/4 as well. So 5 and 3/4 gives us 20/4 and 3/4. So if we add them together, that gives us 23 over 4. And that is our answer. So I think I've explained this in quite a long-winded way because I wanted to try and get you guys to think about what fraction actually is, what it represents, and why you get to this answer. If you wanted to do this quickly, I'll give you another example where you can basically skip a few steps that I've done here to get to your answer. So if we had 2 and 7/8, for example, we wanted to convert that into an improper fraction. What you do is you do the whole number times the denominator, so 2 times 8 is 16, add the numerator, 16 plus 7 gives you 23, and you keep the denominator as 8. So 2 and 7/8 is the same as 23/8. I hope that made a bit more sense. That's the quick rule. If you want to really think about why this works, then try and think about what I talked about here, but otherwise that's all you need to do. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go the opposite. So we're going to start with a mixed number and we can convert it into an improper fraction. So let's pick an example then, random example of 33 over 4. Okay, improper fraction, the numerator is bigger than the denominator. So how do we go about turning this into a mixed number? So what we need to do is we need to take our denominator 4 and we need to divide this into 33. Okay, so 33 is not in the 4 times table, But what we need to do is we need to find the number in the 4 times table that is just below 33. So if we try and picture the 4 times table, so you've got 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, and 32, and then 36. So we can see here that 33 is in between 32 and 36. So 32 is the number which is just below 33, so that's the one we're going to choose. So we know that 4 times 8 gives us 32. So 8 is going to be our number out in the front of our mixed number. Okay? Because 32 divided by 4 gives us 8. And then we think about, okay, so what is then the remainder between 32 to 33? And in this case, the remainder is 1. So then 1 becomes our numerator, and then it is still over 4. We still keep our 4 as the denominator. And that's it. So 33 over 4 gives us 8 and a quarter, 8 and 1/4. Okay, so we divide this by 4. How many times it goes in whole becomes our whole number out the front, and the remainder becomes our numerator of the fraction. Just do that quickly again of another example. We'll choose, I'll go 14 over 3. Okay, we do 14 divided by 3, doesn't work. We'll then say, okay, so I know that 12 is in the 3 times table, and 12 divided by 3 gives us 4. So we'll put 4 out the front. And then what is the remainder? 12, 13, 14, 2 left, so our numerator becomes 2, and we keep our denominator 3. So 14 over 3 becomes 4 and 2/3. And then, of course, if you're unsure of your answer, one thing that you can then do to check your answer is to basically convert it back the other way. It's just using the method we did in the bit earlier in this video. So we'll choose this example then. So if we wanted to convert this mixed number back into an improper fraction, we would multiply the whole number and the denominator. So that's 4 times 3 is 12. Add the 2 gives us 14 as our numerator, and we'll keep our denominator as 3. And that's right, we got the right answer because we started with 14 over 3, converted it into a mixed number and got 4 and 2/3, and then converted that back into an improper fraction and got 14 over 3 again. And that's how we know we got the right answer. Okay, so now we're going to move on to questions which ask you to find a fraction of something. And the example we're going to go through is a really basic example. It says, what is 3/4 of 36? Okay, so the way you would look at these sort of questions is, because what you're after is 3/4 of 36. So the easiest way of thinking about this one is you take 36, okay, and remember ultimately the 3/4 is showing a divide symbol. So what you then do is you then divide by the denominator, 4, which is on the bottom. Okay, you divide by 4, 36 divided by 4 is 9, okay, and then you then multiply this by the numerator, which in this case is 3. So then 9 times 3 equals 27. Okay, and that's our answer. That is the answer to what is 3/4 of 36. You then divide it by the denominator, and then multiply it by the numerator. You could do it the other way around, actually. It doesn't actually matter. You could multiply it by 3 and then divide it by 4, but I don't think anyone wants to do 36 times 3 and then divide that by 4. It's much easier usually doing it the other way around. And that's all you have to do for those ones. Really quick and simple. This method also works for improper fractions as well. So if I wanted to do what is, for example, 4/3 of 12, it works the exact same way. So we'd start off with 12 and we'd say, okay, so we want to divide by the denominator. 12 divided by 3 equals 4. Multiply by the numerator. 4 times 4 equals 16. And that is the answer to what is 4/3 of 12 is 16. And if you notice in this example, the numbers got bigger. And that's because we were giving an improper fraction to start with, where the numerator is bigger than the denominator. If we have an improper fraction, it'll always get bigger. If we have a normal fraction like this, the answer would always get smaller. I just want to quickly show you guys how this would also work if you had a mixed number. So if we had, for example, let's see, if we had 2 4/5 of, I don't know, let's say 15. Okay, so 2 4/5 of 15. I'm not sure if this is how the question would be phrased, but just to show you how it works in the exact same way, you take your whole number to start with, and that is just a basic multiplication. So it would be 2 times 15. So we'd say 2 times 15, and that equals 30. We would then take our fractions separately, and we'd say, okay, so let's do the exact same thing with this fraction as we did in the last example. So we do 15 divided by the denominator 5, gives us 3. And we multiply then by the numerator, which is 4, times 4 equals 12. What we would then do is just add them up. So 30 plus 12 gives us 42. And that would be the answer to 2 4/5 of 15. Okay, I hope that made sense. We haven't really made much of a leap from the last part of the video, but so if you ever ask for a fraction of something, it's usually just divide by the denominator times by the numerator. Okay, so last but not least in this video then, we're going to go over questions that ask you to express one number as a fraction of another number. So the example we're going to go over in this one is write 200 as a fraction of 80. So the way we do this then is we write 200 as a fraction of 80. So when we say this, we write 200, so 200 as the numerator, as a fraction of 80. 80 is our denominator. So we could just leave it as this, as 200 over 80 is a perfectly valid fraction. However, we've already learned how to cancel fractions down, so that's exactly what we're going to do with this one. So remember, if we think back to the beginning of the video where we're cancelling down fractions, we look for a common factor between the numerator and the denominator. So straight away we can see they both end in a 0, so a common factor would be 10. So we divide the top by 10, 200 divided by 10 is 20, and divide the bottom by 10, 80 divided by 10 gives us 8. And again, we know that this isn't the end either, as we know they're both even, so they can at least be divided by 2. So let's do that. So 20 divided by 2 is 10, 8 divided by 10 is 4. Again, we know they're even again, so we can do that exactly the same step. 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. And that is our final answer, 5 over 2, or 5 2s. Right, 80 is 200 is a fraction of 80. Our final answer is 5 over 2. Okay, I hope that and everything else we've been over in this video made sense. I hope you've learned something about fractions, and if you like this video and want to look at more videos from Mitch Maths, then head over to my YouTube channel. I'll be making my website really soon and throwing all this content on there, so go and look at that also. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.